Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are with our level 14 Energy Melee Willpower Brute, Liberty Lass. We have 35,000 experience earned, 8,639 to go to get to the next level, 91,000 influence. And we are on one of my favorite story arcs, the Bonefire arc. We don't have any missions yet, but here are the clues. So Bonefire is the reason it's called Bonefire is you have the skulls who are like bone guys. They're like grave digger choppers and stuff like that. So they're kind of skeleton graveyard guys. Then you have the Hellions who are flamey guys. And so Bonefire, right? Skulls and Hellions. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and why these zones are kind of the way they are. But first, let's talk to our contact, Lorenzo da Costa. And the next Bonefire arc is to take a message to Athena Curry, who is in Steel Canyon. So let's do something weird here. Instead of taking the train, let us fly to Steel Canyon through Perez Park. Perez Park is a hazard zone, which is connected to Skyway, currently connected to Skyway City, Atlas Park, and Steel Canyon. And for a while, it was also connected to Galaxy City, but then they changed Galaxy City with a different tutorial, and they basically had it become a destroyed tutorial zone rather than a zone you could go to. You can still go to it using sort of a flashback, and I'll try to show you that when we get to high enough level to go to Ouroboros, which is a sort of mid-level zone that you can go to. But here is Perez Park. This is the first hazard zone. And if you take a look at the spawns, so the way Hazard Zone works, we haven't actually done Hazard Zones, but the way Hazard Zones work is they usually have very large spawns that have at least a boss, right? Is this guy? Yeah, a boss in them, maybe a couple lieutenants, and a bunch of bad guys. This is actually a fairly small spawn for a Hazard Zone because it's a low level. At the higher levels, you get much larger spawns. And so Perez Park is a Hazard Zone. And what they expected you to do between levels, say, 5 and 9 is to come in here with groups and go through missions. And in fact, I guess they've taken these out, but it used to be the case that they would purposely give you missions in Perez Park, where you had to go to Perez Park and defeat a certain number of the bad guys in Perez Park. And the whole purpose of this was to force you to group. You could not do them solo when you're 5th, 6th, 7th level. You're going to get creamed. And so you had to join a group. And this actually drove a lot of people crazy because, you know, if you're trying to solo or something, maybe you didn't want to join a group, and now you have to. Now, we're high level for this thing, so as you can see, these guys are like 10th level. They might attack me if I get too close, but they can't really do anything to me because they're -4, and there's a badge here, so I decided to go grab it. There's stuff as high as, I think, 13th or 14th level over here. Yeah, these things, the Proteans. And this is sort of a typical hazard zone spawn. You see how large this spawn is. There's a lieutenant. There's probably a boss in here somewhere and a bunch of minions. And if you try to get in here and fight them, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 12 mobs, yeah, that's pretty hard to fight. Over here used to be, it's now where the base portal is, but it used to be that was the entrance to Galaxy City. Over here is Atlas Park, and then over here is Steel Canyon. Now here's the part that I want to talk about, the history. There's two things about the history of Perez Park that you may not know about because they came from closed beta. And even in closed beta, things had changed. So that I think by the time I got into closed beta, this stuff had already changed. So I only know about it through having read the forums in the beta forums, which then got purged when they opened the game. And they like mothballed, they archived the beta forums. They told us they were going to do it, and I went back and like copied and pasted a bunch of my posts. I have no idea what I did with those since. And so the beta forums got purged. So people who came to the game after beta at launch didn't read that stuff, and a lot of them only maybe heard about this third hand through people who had been in beta. This is a forest, right? You can see. And one of the things that's sort of weird about this forest is that if you go down here into the sort of areas between the trees and you try to fly up, you hit the wall, right? You hit it. And this actually ends up being like a dungeon, right? And once you go inside the forest, you can't get out unless you go through another part of the tunnel, right? Going through the woods. This is new relative to the way it was in beta when they originally created it, and I can't tell you what it looked like because the canopy was already locked this way when I got into beta. It used to be that the canopy was open. Now I don't know if that means that when you came down here into one of these tunnel things, you could see the sky, or if it just means that when you went up, you got through the trees. I'm not sure if they just changed the way the collision worked, or if they actually completely enclosed it, but they made it so that you couldn't go through the trees to go from top to bottom. And they did that to, I guess they partly did it because they felt like it would be unfair to say the super speed guys that a flyer could just fly up and down wherever they wanted to and go into the trenches however they wanted. The other thing is somebody said, well, the developers feel like every role CRPG needs a maze, and this is the maze, right? At least for the lower levels. And so that was one of the changes they made during beta. They closed the canopy. Then the second thing they did, this actually has major implications for the storyline, and it's sort of bizarre to me that they never changed the storyline in all the years this game was live. It was live for like 8 years, even though the change to the geography of the map happened in closed beta. So here's the city map. Okay, and we are in Perez Park. Galaxy City's over here. Notice Kings Row is down here. Atlas Park, Skyway, and Steel Canyon. And so they all border Perez Park. If we think about the way the game is structured, Atlas Park is dominated by Hellions. That's the gang that runs Atlas Park. Kings Row is dominated by Skulls. That's the primary gang. I mean, there's other stuff there, but that's the gang that runs Kings Row. And originally, Kings Row connected here to Perez Park, right? I'm not sure exactly where the entrance was, but Kings Row in the past, maybe it was this entrance was up, and maybe it was up here and it connected this way. But originally, Kings Row connected to Perez Park. And so the way this map is laid out in Perez Park is that on this side of the map, near what had been the Kings Row portal, you had mostly skulls. Okay? Over here, if you look in the streets, you have mostly skulls. See? Skulls. Skulls. Okay? And on this side of the map, near Atlas Park, right, so those skulls are bleeding over into this zone from Kings Row, which they own, and they're coming in here to try to take over Perez Park. And on this side, you had Hellions bleeding over into this zone, and they were trying to take over Perez Park. So over here, you have Hellions, and so from down here to up here, you have Hellions, and then from over here to up here, you have Skulls. And the idea was of the Bonefire arc, which had a lot of its, so here's Hellions, right? The Bonefire arc had a lot of its storyline, a lot of its door missions, I think, originally were located in Perez Park. The idea of the Bonefire arc is that there's a gang war going on in Perez Park between the gang from this zone, Atlas Park, and the gang from what used to be this zone, Kings Row. Okay? And during beta, all of the level 1 characters started out in Atlas Park. And then they went to Kings Row. And then after having been in Atlas Park and Kings Row, we're now level 13 or 14, you'd get missions in Perez Park for the Bonefire story arc to deal with the gang war between these two gangs. Okay? But what happened during beta is there were so many people crowded into Atlas Park due to the surge of players coming in, that to take some of the load off the server, I guess, they created a second starter zone, Galaxy City. And that starter zone also has Hellions in it because it's basically just Atlas Park with a different map, right? And consequently, they connected Galaxy City to Perez Park. They bumped Kings Row down here. And so now it kind of made the story not make sense because if you look at the bordering zones here, if this is Galaxy City and this is Atlas Park and they're both Hellions, why are there skulls over here? It doesn't make any sense, right? And so I did not realize this was the case until somebody mentioned it, I think, either in the open beta, and um, and they never changed the storyline or just put skulls in Galaxy City instead of Hellions, right, to make the storyline work. And of course, now Galaxy City has been basically destroyed. So why are the skulls here? How did they get here? Did they come from Steel Canyon? No, there aren't any skulls in Steel Canyon. Steel Canyon has Outcasts. Steel Canyon has Clockworks. Steel Canyon has Circle of Thorns. There are no skulls over here. So anyway, that's why it kind of doesn't make sense. This area is where the Circle of Thorns and the Outcasts are, right? Outcasts there, Circle of Thorns down with the green, right? These guys are Circle of Thorns down here, right? So if somebody's bleeding over into here, it should be Outcasts, not skulls. So anyway, that just makes the whole story a little awkward, because they built the story before beta, and then once beta happened, I think once the closed beta started getting more and more people, and people are making up characters, and they're all trying to shove their way into Atlas Park. Now, the other weird thing about this is that eventually they started instancing the zones. You don't see this much. I assume the servers for Homecoming can do it if necessary. But when there's enough load on the server, yeah, they do, because it actually happened to me when I first started playing on Torchbearer, which was the first of the servers. But what would happen is if there were too many people in Steel Canyon, it would just spawn another, I don't know what the maximum was, 50 or something players. Then when the 51st player tried to go into Steel Canyon, it would just spawn another one. And it would say Steel Canyon North 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And so you would have to tell people if they were coming to meet you, I'm in AP3, which meant Atlas Park 3. And then if they didn't need it anymore, when the last person left the zone, that instance would be deleted, right? And in fact, when City for Heroes first came back and it was being run on private servers and it was a little bit awkward to run, and I guess the people running it didn't have full facility with what to do, there was a weird bug where if you logged off in an instance that then got removed from the server and you tried to log in, your character couldn't log in. It changed it to like Atlas Park 33. It was a famous bug of, I think it was Atlas Park 33 was the number, even though there had never been 33 instances. And if your character was stuck in Atlas Park 33, there was a little bit of time where you basically had to file a customer service ticket and somebody had to do something to move your character to another zone or something to just get you out of that bug, whatever the glitch was. I don't think that happened in live. It just happened at the very beginning of Homecoming. And I think fairly quickly they fixed whatever the problem was with that. It took them a few weeks and then it was fixed, and I've not seen that again. And of course, by making a bunch of different servers, they've taken the load off of the individual servers, so you don't generally see so many people here anymore that you would get the instances happening. But anyway, that's sort of the history of the Bonefire arc. Very nice. That's the history of the Bonefire arc, why there's a Skull and Hellion gang war when the city zones that they occupy don't actually merge, and why they occur where they do in Atlas Park. It's all because in the closed beta and in the original design of the game, the Skulls and Hellions were occupying two city zones that were on opposite sides of Perez Park, right? And then Perez Park was supposed to be the battleground. That's why it was a hazard zone, right? Hazard zones are places in the city where the villains have gotten so in control of things, and there are so many of them, that the good citizens of Paragon City have basically abandoned it and don't live there anymore. Right? So there aren't any. You're not going to see families having picnics in Perez Park. It's too dangerous. The only people who go into Perez Park besides the villains are the superheroes. The police have like police barricades, and they protect the entrances through the war walls so that the villains don't get through. But even the police don't have enough manpower to go into these hazard zones, so they're relying on the superheroes to go into the hazard zones and start to take the villains out. And it's unfortunate that they never really had a system in City of Heroes for progressing the story, because it would have been really cool to me if they had made it so that after you defeat the bad guys in the Bonefire arc and stop the gang war, if then when you went to Perez Park, you got to a nicer version of Perez Park where it's been renovated, and because of you and your supergroup's actions, Perez Park has been fixed and is no longer a hazard zone, right? So like two versions of Perez Park. Perez Park pre-Bonefire that you would only get to now, and then Perez Park that you would get to at higher levels. They did this in Lord of the Rings Online, right? Where before you got to a certain part of the main storyline, Bree would look one way, and then after it would look a different way. If you once you got to the part where they, knocked down the walls looking for Frodo, then Bree would be different, right? And then you couldn't get back to the version that was before Frodo, right? And with City of Heroes, I guess what you could do is give the player the option when they click on the entrance to the hazard zone. Just give them the option: do you want to go to hazard zone version or the fixed version, or just do it by sidekicking, right? If you sidekick below a certain level, there's a boss, compound fracture. If you sidekick below a certain level, you see the hazard version, and if you sidekick above that level, if you past the level of the story arc, then you're going to see the nice version, something like that. There had to be a clever way to do it, and I wish they had done that. They did progress a couple of the zones, like Fault Line. But it was progressed for everybody, where they've repaired a little bit of it, and they did that when they renovated that zone. One of the problems with hazard zones is they were made entirely. The whole design of the game obviously was done before it launched, right? Necessarily, that's the case, and I guess the developers had a very sort of old school MMO like Ultima Online EverQuest line of thinking when they were designing the game, because when they were designing the game, that's what was out there. Those and like Anarchy Online and Lineage, right? That's basically what was there, and maybe one or two others, and they all kind of played the same way, and they were mostly open world, sort of not sandboxes. They were open world, and I don't want to say sandboxes. They were basically open world where you just went out and you killed monsters, right? And so going out into the environment and defeating things was kind of the normal way to play. But City of Heroes had an innovation that they didn't realize everybody was going to like so much, which is the missions and the story arcs. And what players wanted to do was play missions, not just wander around fighting random mobs in hazard zones. And the missions are scaled to your level and your group size, so they're perfect. Like, the challenges are perfect for your group, no matter what size and what level, which is a really nice feature of missions, and is one of the best things that they did in the design of the game. And if you want to know, by the way, why I saw the boss and I ignored him, I was just running around trying to see if I could maybe get a few inspirations before I went down to fight him, but I guess not. So we'll just fight him normally. We should be fine. So anyway, what happened is the hazard zones were popular early when the game first launched. People could go to hazard zones in local chat, say LFG. You'd wait by the entrance, group up with whoever was standing by the entrance, get into a group and go farm the hazard zone, and it would respawn quickly and that sort of thing. The problem with it was that it was so good to do that. It was so efficient to do that. Right? That's how I've mentioned this in some other videos. That's how the guy who got to level 40 the day it launched, which was the max, that's how he did it. He did it by farming the hazard zones. Right? You just churn through those mobs so fast. And he did it with an exploit, the burn exploit. I'm not going to talk about that because I have described that in one of the, I think, Quintessence last videos, or maybe it was the one of the Let's Rants. And so, anyway, that's how he did it, was farming hazard zones. And what happened was that the farming hazard zones, street sweeping and farming hazard zones was so efficient that players were ignoring story arcs and ignoring missions and just leveling all the way up super quickly in the street. And they were complaining that the game was boring and there wasn't anything to do because they weren't doing the missions, right? And when they asked, why aren't you doing the missions? Well, the answer was, it's not as efficient. Because you have to walk through hallways and everything. In the hazard zones, you just go from spawn to spawn. And as you saw in Perez Park, they're all right next to each other. If you're not careful, you can aggro multiple spawns. And sometimes you, with a tanker, you would purposely aggro multiple spawns. A tanker would run around taunting and gathering up 3 or 4 spawns and bring them into one spot. And then the blasters will all stay up here and AoE them to death. And it was really efficient to do stuff like that. And it was way faster than doing it in a mission, because of the elevators and stairways and narrow hallways and stuff like that. And so, consequently, the hazard zones were the most effective way, and nobody was doing missions. And so, to get people to do missions, what they started doing was here, right, giving mission XP. And they made it substantial, right? It looks like this mission gave me 900 XP versus 88 XP for defeating a boss, right? So it's like defeating 10 bosses. It's worth it now. But in a sense, they made it too good, right? They gave bonuses for missions. They gave bonuses for story arcs. We're going to go to Perez Park now. And that are worth even more, right? And they would give badges once they created badges for story arcs. And so what happened was that people started ignoring the hazard zones and just doing missions. And the hazard zones became wastelands. Heroes never go to hazard zones anymore unless there's a mission like this that takes you to a hazard zone. And this one isn't taking us to a hazard zone. It's just that it'll be faster to defeat 20 Hellions and 20 Skulls in Perez Park because of the large spawns, and we're like 5 levels above them, so I'll just cut through them with my AoE. It'll just be a massacre, right? But we're not killing anyone or crippling anyone. We're just knocking them out and letting the teleporter take them to prison. So yeah, what happened is the hazard zones became wastelands, right? Nobody comes in here. Are there any players in here? Right? If you came in here at launch, you wouldn't even be able to find these Hellions here because they would have been constantly being beaten up by the LFG groups that had just formed right here, and then they would run in here and start beating people up. Right? So yeah, the hazard zones, once the missions became more efficient to use than street sweeping, the hazard zones became wastelands where there were no players using them. And as a consequence, let's see if we can get this guy. Got him. As a consequence, the hazard zones became completely unused. And so what the guys from City of Heroes said was, okay, we're going to start renovating the hazard zones into something that would be more useful. If you go to the Hollows was actually designed like this, where it's a hazard zone with a story arc in it. So now if you go to that hazard zone, you don't have to just street sweep, right? There are no contacts in this zone. There are no story arcs in this zone. There are no shops in this zone. There are no trainers in this zone. But if you go to a zone like the Hollows, you'll see there is a trainer. There are shops, the guys that sell stuff. There are several contacts throughout the zone that give you a story arc that's the story of the zone. And it's actually a pretty cool story, right? And they also did this with Fault Line, which was just a hazard zone, and everybody hated it because it wasn't flat like this. It was all this vertical relief because it was hit by an earthquake. And so people with super speed hated it. People with super jump, were fine. But people with super speed hated it, and a lot of people did not like that zone, and so they kind of had it be quote unquote repaired, right? And then they put a trainer, they put a shop, a hospital, right, and several quest givers, and the story of Fault Line and how it was made, right, how it became this destroyed, wrecked, earthquake smashed zone. And the reason it was destroyed is revealed in that storyline, right? And so that is how they tried to revamp the hazard zones. And I think if City of Heroes had not been mothballed and basically deleted by NCSoft back in 2012, I think the plan was to eventually revamp all of the hazard zones with a story arc. And my guess is they might have brought the entire Bonefire arc here into Perez Park with several contacts and put and fixed up part of the park, right? So you have the skulls on this side and the Hellions maybe on this side, and maybe they would have fixed up, I don't know, this part of the park or something. And then they would have had a storyline, and what their storylines usually do is take you to all the different regions of the zone and give you a little bit of story with each region. And my guess is they would have done the same thing with Boomtown, which is also just completely abandoned. Boomtown used to be one of the more popular zones to go to because there were so many enemies, and you would go in there and level up. And now you never ever see other players in that zone. Same thing with Craze Folly; they're just empty, and they used to be full, right? There would be multiple groups of street sweepers in these zones, and it was so bad that you'd have to call dibs on a spawn, right? And I remember being in Perez Park like this, where we were going through the skulls and stuff, and there would be another group, and what we would kind of do is we'd kind of leapfrog. So we would they would take this spawn and we'll take this spawn, and then they would take the next spawn, and we'll take the spawn after that, right? So they would take these guys and we'll take these guys, right? And we would just sort of leapfrog over each other so that we didn't get in each other's way, right? But you don't have to do that anymore because nobody... Who's attacking me? Nobody uses Perez Park or Boomtown or Craze Folly or any of those zones anymore. A Dark Astoria is another one they changed. They made it a level 50 zone, and there's a whole other series of story arcs there. So you can't go into the old Dark Astoria. So this is what they were trying to do, was to revamp the hazard zones so that they were not regular zones, but they had a storyline, and you could go there and stay in the zone for a while and level up and learn a story and do a story arc and get a badge and that sort of stuff. Whereas these areas, there's literally no reason to come to Perez Park unless they give you a door mission like this. And this one is possibly the finale. I'm not sure. Because I know the finale takes place in a cave. This might be... Is this the first cave we've done? These caves, there were a whole bunch of these in early missions when I started to play, and these caves were single-handedly responsible for the person I was talking about, the fiance of the one friend of mine, not being able to play City of Heroes, because this whole where the camera is getting close and far depending on how you rotate it, it was just making her nauseated, I guess I should say, or dizzy or whatever. She had some kind of vertigo. I remember my friend telling me about this years later, that it had gotten much worse. But at the time, she was able to play with us outside, and then when we started having these missions, and there were so many of them. And what you have to realize too is that I think originally, if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost certain this is true. Somebody comment if I'm wrong, but initially, if 3 of you had a mission, the same mission, like if 3 of us had this mission, we all had to do it. Like, and we're in a group. You and me and Kievar all have this mission, and we're grouped up. I do it. We'd have to go out of the door and then start Kievar's mission and go back in and do it for him, and then go outside and start your mission and do it for you, for us to all get it. And it was in a later patch, I don't remember which one, I don't remember if it was one of the issues or what, that after a lot of grumbling from players, they made it so that if 3 or 4 people in a group have this mission and this story arc, it'll complete for all of us. And we all get credit. They were very reluctant to do that at first, as I recall. I'm almost certain of this. And after some long discussion about this, they finally decided, okay, we'll let you do it. Now, the reason they were reluctant, especially at the beginning, was they didn't have enough content, guys, for this game. Right? There were, once you get from level to level 15, then you had, I want to say 4 or 5 contacts for each 5 level range. I think it was 5. With the general idea being that each contact would give you a story arc long enough to gain you a level. But the problem was that the leveling was too fast the way they initially had it, so they slowed it down, but they didn't have time to add more content. And so what would happen is you would go through all 5 of your contacts, and not right away, like not in level 15 to 20 or 20 to 25, but after you got past 25, you'd go through all, and definitely in the 30s and 40s, you'd go through all of your contacts. You would have no more contacts available, like nothing left on your list, and you'd have a level and a half to go. You'd be like level, I very strongly remember when Liberty Lass was a fire invuln tanker, and she was level 19, and I was trying to get to level 20. I was flying around the southern part of Skyway City where the highest level mobs were at the time, Lost and stuff, just street sweeping for an entire level because I had nothing left of my contacts. And again, I don't think they thought this would be a problem because they expected people to do a lot of what we call street sweeping, because that's how people had played other MMOs. But people ended up wanting to do the missions and complaining there's not enough mission content, right? You guys should have enough missions to level me up. And so I think one of the reasons they didn't want to let people complete, like, the mission complete for 3 or 4 of us at once is because it would mean that we wouldn't have those missions to do, and we would run out of content, you see. And so that's kind of why it took them a while to do that. And so what happened with her was, okay, 3 or 4 of us are on the Bonefire arc. We all needed help to do Marrow Snap. We separated to do the other missions. Now we need help to do this one. So we all get together, and everybody's got this mission, and we all need to get it done. So we get together as a group tonight, and we're all 4 or 5 of us are going to do it. And so this map was bad once, but she'd have to do it again and again, right? And she just couldn't. And so she quit playing City of Heroes because there wasn't any way to tell the game, don't give me cave missions, right? I mean, realistically, in most cases, there's no particular reason why a mission should take place in a cave versus a warehouse or whatever. And things like the warehouses, which have really high ceilings, I don't think were a real problem for her. But the caves just got her, and it was making her sick to her stomach or something, and she just had to stop playing. I actually remember being on with her, and she was part of the group, and we did a couple of cave missions, and then she's like, okay guys, I gotta log out. And we were surprised that, we'd only been playing for like half an hour. And I think I sent a private message to my friend and said, or maybe I asked in the super group chat or whatever, is something wrong, right? Did somebody upset her or whatever? And he said, no, she just can't handle the camera movements in these enclosed areas. Now, I think City of Heroes does a lot better with this than most other games. But still, I can understand how somebody would be bothered by it, because as I said in the last episode, I think, or the one before this, with the screen shaking, the screen shake does that to me, and I really hate it. I mean, it's not to the point where I can't play, but I hate it enough that I try to turn it off in any game that has it. And if it's happening like in City of Heroes, I try to go to a zone where there's no screen shake, because I can't stand it. I absolutely hate it. Um, so yeah, and I actually remember that this guy. It was really an interesting thing. A couple of years later, when Facebook had gotten big and a lot of us were on Facebook, this same friend. What did I miss here? Got to go north, I guess. This same friend was posting pictures to Facebook of like guns that he was buying. This is some guy from, my neighborhood. We played role-playing games together. Now he did take martial arts. Here's a boss. So let's. He did take martial arts lessons. He actually became a martial arts teacher in Kenpo karate, and apparently was quite good at it. So yeah, I mean he was doing that, but he never seemed like a violent person. That was self-defense, and I don't know. It just seemed very weird to both me and my best friend, who were Facebook friends with him, that this guy is posting pictures of. I mean, not just like Colt 45s or something, assault rifles and all kinds of like. I don't know if it was assault rifles. It looked like machine guns and stuff. Like he was really into guns, and he was buying all these like pretty high-end, pretty hardcore guns. And I finally asked him about it. What's the story? Why are you buying all these guns? And what he told me was that his fiance or girlfriend, whatever she was, I feel like they were they never got married, but she was his fiance for a really long time. He's now married to somebody else. But this particular woman was, her vertigo was so bad, or her balance, that, like, he was very athletic, this guy. And in addition to karate and stuff, he would ski, and he would play tennis, and he would go jogging and biking and everything. And I guess she couldn't do anything that required her to move around a lot because of her sense of balance or whatever. But somehow, despite that, she was able to hold a gun and do target practice. And so, in order to have something kind of sporty that they could do together, because his interest was very much sports and competitiveness and all that kind of stuff, and she couldn't ski with him, she couldn't go jogging with him, she couldn't race bikes with him or any of that, which probably he would have preferred. But she could stand at the pistol range and do a pretty good job with the targets. And so he said, I'm not actually really all that into guns, but it's one kind of the one hobby that we can kind of share that she can kind of do with her, basically her disability. And so then that's why he was doing that. But it was that same person who was not able to play City of Heroes because of that same, essentially, disability. And so, yeah, this is the first time, I think, in this playthrough that I've been in a cave. My best friend hates these caves. I actually hate other maps worse, but he hates these caves because they're often defeat all. He told me this not too long ago, actually. It wasn't when we first were playing. He told me it's very recently, a couple years ago, we were playing together, and he's like, oh, I hate these caves, especially defeat all, because if you have to defeat everybody, well, these caves are like, it's very hard to be sure you've been everywhere. And there's always some nook or cranny where there's somebody hiding. And it can be extremely frustrating unless they put the little red arrows up and tell you exactly where they are. And the thing about that feature is that although it exists in the game and it's supposed to be there to help you, and it usually does, it's rather arbitrary seeming whether it actually triggers in a mission or not. There are some defeat all missions where it just doesn't trigger. Also, you have to get enough of them in order for it to trigger. So it only triggers when there's like one spawn left, right? If there's more than that, then is this one of these where there's another level above this? Doesn't look like it. If there's more than that, then it won't show them to you. So if there are 2 or 3 spawns left, and you don't know where they are because you missed a side pocket of the cave network, then you simply won't find it, right? And they won't show up on the map, and so you're gonna have to like figure it out the hard way. So yeah, these maps can be very hard to find enemies in. However, one thing I will say that I absolutely love about City of Heroes is you can see in this cave. There's no light source technically, but they still made it light enough that you can see what the heck you're doing. This is one of my pet peeves, and I've mentioned this before, and it's one of the things they didn't do correctly in City of Villains with the Arachnos bases. That they made those extremely hard to see in, which I despise. I love realism in video games, but one of the things I don't like in a lot of video games where they have caves and areas that are dark in character is they make it dark for the player. Hard to see as a player. Now, I know it might be quote-unquote hard for your character to see, but this is a video game, and I paid a lot of money for my graphics card, and I am not getting any bang for my graphics card's buck if this thing is so dark that I can't see anything. Can't see past the nose on my character's face. What are all the graphics here for, right? So you definitely get the sense that we're in a dark cave, right? There's no sense in which you think it's daylight in here. But you can absolutely see everything. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, the other characters. And so I think the same thing is true in the City of Heroes zones outside at night, right? They made the darkness, and you can see it here, kind of purple rather than black. And this means that you can actually see what's going on in the game fully. There's no sense in which you can't tell what's going on. You know that this guy's got an axe and he's swinging at me or whatever, and you can see it clearly, and I really prefer that. I absolutely detest video games where they make it so you cannot see what you're doing. And so I do understand why this guy's girlfriend was having trouble with the map, this particular type of map, and there are others she probably never saw, like the lab maps that would have been just as bad for her, if not worse. However, compared to the way other games do it, City of Heroes is miles better about making sure that you can see what you're doing when you play the game. And that to me is paramount. That is always what you want. You need to be able to see what you're doing when you're playing a game. And if you can't see for any reason, I don't care how in character it is, the developers did a bad job and I don't like it. And there's Bonebreaker. So we beat the leader of the Hellions, and now we beat the leader of the Skulls. Right, and that's what's going on here. We defeat the two bosses of the two gangs. If this were a more modern, and especially or a slightly higher level mission, these guys would be elite bosses, or they would have even been arch villains, which are much higher ranked enemies and are much harder to defeat. But for this mission, because it's for newbies, I think they just went with it, because they didn't have elite bosses when the game first came out. So I think they just went with regular bosses. And so now we have a problem, right? Here comes the problem, right? Where are the last couple of guys? So, yeah, and you just gotta, like, hope to find them. I don't think brutes have an automatic taunt the way tankers do. So one thing that can help you with tankers, when we finish the story arc, you can see we get story arc experience too. I wonder how come we got that. Remember we had 933 XP? Is that from taking down the boss? No, that's the boss there, isn't it? I'm not really sure, guys. Maybe it was at the lieutenant? I don't know. I have been watching, so you can go back and watch the video and see how much XP each guy was giving us. But yeah, we have 375 XP and 900 and 250 influence. We got 23 reward merits. If we look at our salvage, we now have 51 of them. Those reward merits can be used to buy recipes for the archetype specific enhancements that come in the higher levels. I think you can actually buy them now, but like we don't have enough reward merits to do that, and I wouldn't bother. We're now almost 15th level. We've completed that story arc, and we're going to talk to... And there's our story arc. So that was mission XP there. So there's our story arc XP. 1,300 experience and 450 influence, and we're level 15. So let's head to Alice Park, and we'll train, because it's the nearest one. So yeah, this is nighttime. Right? It's definitely night. You can't see these buildings. It's dark at a distance. But here, you can see what you're doing. I love it. Every video game should be done like this. So that you can see what the heck you're doing. I also think they did a really, really good job in City of Heroes with the day-night cycle. It goes quickly enough that you're not always stuck on one time of day. I can't remember which game it was that I was playing. I can't remember which one it was, where it was on a 24-hour cycle. And if you freaking were in a server, and it was based on like the local time of the server, and there were servers like in Europe and Asia and North America. And so if you were playing at night, if you always played at like 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and you were in servers in your region, it was always night. And I remember complaining about that. Why is it always night? Why is it always night? And somebody was like, dude, that's why I'm playing on the American servers. I live in Australia, and I can only play at this time of day, or whatever. I can't remember. No, he said play on the Australian servers. If you play at this time of day, because it'll be like afternoon tomorrow there, and so you'll play during the day. And I'm pretty sure that the people who ran whatever game, I can't remember which game it was, but they ultimately did was they put it on like a 22-hour cycle or something, so that slowly over time you could go from the night to the day, so that you weren't always playing at night. But yeah, I mean, you can clearly see the city here, right? Looks great. You can see now. I mean, of course, this is a modern city, so you would see lights. One of the weird things is there's no lights on these buildings over here. That's just because of what they call LOD, level of detail. So with a higher level of detail, in fact, there is a command for that. I got to go look that up. There's a command that'll give me more detail in the distance. I can't remember what it's called. So I got to go back and look. There is a command for that. Oh boy, look at all the people here. Quite nice to see such a crowded server. Training up to level 15. And we're going to finish health. And then we're going to add, I guess, 1 to energy punch. There we go. So guys, we have gotten to level 15. We've completed the Bonefire story arc, and I've told you a little bit about the history of City of Heroes and what it was like to play back then, and even in beta. Let me know if you want me to keep strolling down memory lane. I don't have to do that, obviously, but a few people in the comments seem to like it. So if you do and you want to stroll down memory lane with me, I'll be happy to do that. If there's something particular that you want to know about, like what was it like to do this or that during the, which power sets were not available at launch, or whatever is of interest to you. I don't know everything, and it's been 20 years, but I know a lot, and I have a pretty good memory, and I'll be perfectly happy to take strolls down memory lane and tell you guys what it was like when the game first launched. I hope you've enjoyed. I certainly have. We're level 15 now. Man, we got a bunch of enhancements. Well, let's take a look just so that you can see what's going on here. We've got some... Oh, we have a single origin damage. That's nice. Let's put that there. So Energy Punch will do more damage. We have a single origin stun. That's not useful. Let's see. Single origin recharge is not worth it. Let's see. Defense buff. There's more damage, but we can't combine that with a single origin. I guess that's about it. So we're going to sell the rest of this stuff. We don't need it. And we are going to think about upgrading our dual origin enhancements to more dual origin enhancements when we get to level 17. So the reason we do it at the 2s and the 7s. So there are several different philosophies to this. The reason you do it at the 2s and the 7s is because you can't slot in an enhancement until you're within 3 levels of it. And so at level 12, I could slot in 15s. Couldn't do it at 11. Now you don't have to do it at 12, but if you do it at 12, then you get to use the enhancement from level 12 until level 18. And then at level 17, you can get the next set of enhancements. So that's one way to do it. The other way that a bunch of my friends used to do was they would wait till the 3s and the 8s. So they would go to 13 with their level 10 enhancements. Now their level 10 enhancements is -3 to them. But then they would buy the level 15 enhancement and combine it with the level 10 and to make it a level 15 plus. Now they do the combining differently here. They turn it to level 16 and 17 apparently. And so because they do that, you probably don't have to do that anymore. But back in the day, they would do that. And so the idea was you could either do it at the 2s and the 7s or at the 3s and the 8s. I always did 2s and 7s. I always ripped them out. I didn't combine. I just ripped everything out at like level 17 and put new stuff in for level 20, right? Because you can't combine at level 17 with a level 20 because that would get you to level 21, 20 plus, and you can't have a level 21 enhancement at level 17. So some people would wait till 18. They'd say it gives me another level to save up, and then they would do the combination. I always just did it at the 2s and the 7s and just ripped the old ones out and put new ones in. There's no real right way to do it. That's just kind of how I always did it. Anyway, so we're looking okay with all of our slotting, and this is what our powers look like. I still need to get hover at some point. Possibly at level 60. No, I need to get build up. Build up. I think level 16 is going to be build up because that'll just like increase all of our powers. So the way the way build up works, and then we'll stop, is it gives you extra damage and extra chance to hit. So usually what it does is it doubles your damage and it increases your to hit by like plus 20%. And then, you can buff it so that it recharges a lot and gives you better to hit buffs. And mostly what I do is I just triple slot it, give 3 recharges so it cuts the recharge time in half. And then you build up as often as possible. I don't know what the recharge time is on this one. Usually what happens is the build up lasts for 10 seconds and takes about a minute to recharge. And if you put the recharge enhancers on it, it lasts for 10 or 15 seconds and it recharges every 30. So you can have build up running roughly 50% of the time. And what people used to do is, I'll tell this story and then we'll stop. They would get hasten, which also will speed things up. They would make hasten permanent. You can't do that anymore because they changed the recharge time, but you used to be able to put enough recharge enhancers on it so you could be permanently hastened. And with perma haste and enough recharge enhancers on build-up, you could have perma build-up. And all of your powers are doing double damage all the time without even enhancements on it. That's the old way to build in City of Heroes. The developers decided they didn't want us doing that, and they basically nerfed things so that we couldn't. That happened between the hasten nerf and the global defense nerf, and also the enhancement diversification. So if you want to know about the GDN, the global defense nerf, the hasten nerf, or the enhancement diversification, which is basically the enhancement nerf, let me know and I'll tell that story again. I did tell it in one of my Scrapper videos, but I don't remember which one. So if you want me to tell one of those stories again, just let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to do that, or take any other strolls down memory lane you want. Also, if you have any questions about the game, about why I'm playing the way I do, about, power sets, enhancements, how to do that, anything like that, I'll help as much as I can. Keep in mind, my main character types are the melee types. I'm really, really good at doing builds and slotting and stuff for my playstyle, which is soloing missions or group missions, not incarnate trials. For scrappers, brutes, stalkers, and to a slightly lesser degree, tankers. Um, I'm not so good at things like blasters, controllers. I'm pretty good at dominators. I'm not so good at blasters, controllers, or defenders, or corruptors, or any of that. I've done some mastermind, but if you want to see how I do mastermind, you can just go and watch the mastermind playthrough with Nightmare Last. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes on the Homecoming servers.